Well, hello and welcome to this episode of a series of videos designed to give you an insight into the Ultra Challenges by Action Challenge. This video is all about foot care and welfare, hopefully keeping you tip-top. As always, I'm joined by experienced walker Jim Smith, taking part in around about 15 of our Ultra events. Running coach Matt Buck, who's taken part in some of the world's toughest Ultra events, and event director and director of Action Challenge, Julian Risley. Pleasure to have you here. Feet, it's one of the things I think from my experience of taking part in these events as a host, people who end up retiring, it tends to be a lot of it down to people's footwear and how their feet are behaving. Jim, your experience, how important is it to keep those feet healthy?
I think it's one of the most singular reasons we see people having difficulty or even having to retire out of the events tends to be foot-related issues, be it just blisters, be it, we've seen trench foot before now, but people who don't air out the feet, all centred around this area. It tends to be foot care and foot maintenance, and you get that right, you stand the best chance of finishing strong.
So how can you do that in the training section? Obviously you can't just do it from the day of the event. This takes months and months of training and preparation. Matt, from your experience, what's your best tips and the way to approach this?
I think to put it very bluntly is it's key to do the training. Make sure you've worked out the best footwear for you. There's no point me telling you or Jim telling you what shoes to wear, because it's what's right for you as a person. Work out the best footwear for you and just make sure you train. When you're training, don't only go out on sunny days or when the weather's nice. Go out in all weathers, because you don't know what it's going to be like on the day. If it's particularly wet during the event and you've only been out on the sunny days, then you're going to struggle and you're probably going to get blisters from wet feet. So if you are lucky and you only train on sunny days, then hammer it through all those puddles. That's what I do. In training, I aim for the puddles so that my feet get used to being wet. And over time of training, you get used to it. And yeah, you should be okay in the event if you do that.
Now, people always say never change your footwear too close to an event, but at some point people do decide to change footwear. When's the best time to experiment and to get your feet used to that footwear, be it as a runner or as a walker?
It's going to be the mileage you can put up there. If you're going from a very similar pair to another very similar pair, or if you're lucky enough to get the same make, I know it's tempting to, when I find a pair that works for me, I like to stock up and get a few of them in. If you're going similar to similar, not as many as if you're going to something completely different, and it depends on the footwear themselves. If it's very heavy leather boots, they're obviously going to take a lot more to wear in than something made out of man-made fabrics and a bit lighter. Again, it sounds a very cliche, but it is what works for the individual and what works for those circumstances. There's a lot of anecdotal advice out there. Get as much advice as you can, listen to as many opinions as you can, but ultimately the only way to actually find something you know is going to work is finding it for you and then testing it during your training.
And Julian, in your experience, you've been at all these ultras. Would you say that's one of the main things, people's sort of footwear and issues with feet, people retiring from an event?
Certainly foot-related problems are by far the biggest single reason. About 85% of people complete 100 kilometres if they set out, roughly, that's about the average. Most of those dropouts aren't exhaustion or certainly not running out of time, because people don't run out of time. It is foot issues, and that is often blisters, and they can get to that state either because they're not dealing with them early enough, and so on-event treatment's part of this, which kind of comes after getting the right fundamentals in place, footwear, perhaps keeping your feet as dry as possible, changing your socks, perhaps having a spare pair of shoes. We have baggage services on our events, so you can have a second pair at halfway, perhaps a bit different, perhaps a bit more spacious. I mean, people's feet often swell up a bit. So all things around feet is definitely the biggest single issue. So you've got to take it super seriously, figure out what works for you, and then, as we said, you'll stand a far better chance. Yeah.
And that's the thing, not everybody's got the same rules, because everybody's different. I mean, Jim, for instance, do you kind of go down the strapping route and Vaseline and all those other bits to go with it?
Yeah, so I've tried multiple over the years. I've tried Vaseline, I do a bit of taping, I do a bit of talc, depends on the conditions. So if it's going to be a very, very hot event or it's forecast to be warm, then I'll tend to go down more the talc and taping route. If it's going to be a very wet event, then I find Vaseline for me works a little bit better. It's having that knowledge and advice that you get from others and more experienced people and adapting it and one of the best pieces of advice is exactly as we mentioned before, getting out in all conditions. You know, you absolutely, you hope for the best, but you train for the worst every time.
And terrain's another one, because you know, over 100 kilometres you are going to come across a lot of different terrain. Matt, your experience on some of these ultras, what's the best way to tackle and to train and look after your feet and, you know, all your whole body, your whole welfare?
From a running point of view, and probably a walking point of view as well, it's important to have what I call a hybrid trainer. So there are sections in a lot of the races, there'll be little sections of road, you might have hard packed surfaces, paths and things, there might be rocky sections, hills, routes to get over, you name it. So you want a shoe that's going to get you through all of those conditions. There's no point having a shoe with really aggressive tread on the bottom. That might be great when you're in a muddy patch, but if that muddy patch is only for 1 kilometre of 100, then they're going to wreck your feet and your legs for the rest of the time. So try and get a shoe that is comfortable, obviously, but will suit all the sort of conditions underfoot that you'll find.
And Julian, each of these stops, there are so many great stops there, lots going on there. Certainly the bigger ones have, you know, various things to help people as well. What exactly do you actually trying to supply with all the stops?
3 levels really. It's we clearly advise everyone to sort of bring their own little first aid kit. Deal with blisters early. That's the key. So it just happens to be between rest stop. Mm-hmm. Don't wait for the rest stop. Yeah? Deal with it early. Put some Compeed on whatever you use. Yeah. At all the rest stops, we have self-help areas. So we have the talc, the Vaseline, the plasters. So help yourself to those. That's what it's there for. It's by the medical area, so there's medics there to help as well. Then we have full-blown medics and doctors. So if your feet really get bad, they're there to dress your feet properly and give you the best shot at continuing. If they're too bad, they might say, well, you know, don't risk it. But
cut it off.
Toenails is the other thing, by the way. That's we find a lot of these events. It's toenails which are perhaps a bit too long.
Yeah.
So without overcutting, do it early again. Don't do it the night before, because you'll probably cut your toenail back too far and it hurts. Yeah. But toenails and then losing toenails and then actually struggling for a month or so afterwards, very common. Yeah. So cut them right back, but cut them sensibly. Yeah?
Another gem of advice, just very briefly, would be socks, fresh socks.
Yeah. They're
absolutely godsend, particularly on a wet event, but even on a normal event, you'll be looking to change your socks 3 or 4 times during an event, and that makes a big difference.
It's more than I do in a week, but that's fine, that's all right. And something that, again, I haven't had one yet, but every time I go to one of these events and I'm the host on the start line, the midway, the finish, I keep mentioning to everybody you can go and get a massage if they're taking part in it. I can't get one, but that does help, I guess. Some people really buy into that and want to go and get a massage just to sort of relax those muscles during the event, but also afterwards, perhaps.
Absolutely. So, you know, I'm a big fan of sports massages during my training, during the events, even if it's just a mental boost. So having a bit of a break, getting some of your calves loosened off can provide you a good mental boost to kind of get yourself through to the final stages. And afterwards, through recovery, you know, just a nice gentle warm down kind of helps people on the road to recovery as well. And just finally on that subject, when you finish an event, how often, having done sort of 15 of our ultras, for you, how long does it take you to recover? Sometimes I have to recover quite quick with other challenges. So it again very depends how the conditions were. Normally I'd be looking to take a good week or so off and then start to build up again. During the rest and recovery, it's not a case of just putting your feet up and doing nothing. I find trying to still keep moving, just any way of not sitting around, because then you're just going to feel worse and everything starts to stiffen up even worse. So keeping moving when you can is a good bit of advice.
Good. Well, hopefully this video is giving you a bit of an insight and some helpful tips and hints is what I was trying to say. And this will sort of intrigue you to do part of our ultras. Get involved. There are loads of ultras this year, and there are also loads of these videos to give you an insight in how to best tackle, be that training, be that the kit you need to bring, the food, dehydration, nutrition, and loads more videos as well. Thank you guys for coming in. As we're going to be saying a lot this year, push yourself further. And we're going to join in together, and we're going to use the initials PYF on this, okay, to the camera. Everybody push yourself over. Here we go. PYF.